talk about today is to learn a little bit about the themes and the practices and the rituals that go on in a Jewish life. And this is something that most of us, well, the talk is going to be a lot longer than what we're going to talk about. But a lot of the things that we're going to cover are things that we know, we're familiar with. Like we all know that there's a circumcision, and we know that we heard of the bar mitzvah, and we know that a little bit about the Jewish marriage ceremony. And unfortunately, most of us, I'm sure, have had encounters with death and bereavement, and that element of Jewish life and practice. So these are things that we're familiar with. And kind of like when we talked about holidays, like we didn't tell information about Jewish life that maybe perhaps we didn't know. But what we are trying to do is to maybe expose the meaning behind some of these ideas. And today, we're going to start with, when does life start? So this is a hotly debated topic. With this, like when we say the sentence, life begins at, and then we could argue, is it conception, is it birth, is when someone can start paying their own bills? I don't know.
We're Jews. Life begins once you get out of...
once you get your PhD.
Either PhD, either doctor or law school.
So what's interesting is that in Jewish writings, in Jewish literature, we find that life begins before conception, which I think is always a surprise. We find incredible statements in Jewish writings, Jewish teachings, that tell us some very interesting details about what happens to the child before conception, which is bizarre. Like, what is the child even before conception? And also, like, what's the relevance to us? Like, why is it important for us to know what happens to a child before conception? And how does that impact our lives? So what's the lesson that we could take from it? So let me give you guys the examples. I have two sources. These are both from the Talmud. Number one, we find like this. This is from the Talmud in Nida 16. It says like this. And the angel that is in charge of conception, the angel's name is Lila. Okay? The angel takes a drop of semen, brings it to God, and tells God, this drop, will this be someone intelligent or someone foolish, silly, someone not intelligent? I don't know what's the word for someone not intelligent. I guess foolish, right? Will this child be rich, wealthy, or poor? And will this child be strong or weak? And, however, will the child be righteous or wicked? That's not discussed. And the Talmud concludes, Hakol b'yedei shamayim, chutz miyirat shamayim. Everything is in the hands of heaven, aside from fear of heaven. This is a statement. So what does this tell us? Before conception, right, we're taking this drop, and we're determining what's it going to be. Is it going to be intelligent, or the grade of intelligence on wealth, and on and what's the last one? Intelligence, wealth, and physical might. What lesson can we possibly deduce from this? And additionally, by the way, I'll tell you guys a secret. Later on in the very same book, it asks the question, what does someone do and become wealthy? Ma ya'aseh adam v'yit asher. Which clearly it's indicating that there's something that you can do to become wealthy. But the previous Talmud seems to indicate that no, it's all predetermined. And what's the lesson for us? Like, okay, I'm 28. And I'd like to be wealthier, maybe, right? This is America, right? You got your green card. And I'm like, if you read this, it's a little bit deflating.
But Adam's got $1 billion.
Not yet, but it's a little deflating. You're reading about, so everything that maybe I think is important, I can't become any smarter. It's already predetermined. God's already said, whatever it is, wealthy or poor, it's already predetermined. It's kind of deflating. It's not inspiring. So we have this seemingly pointless instruction, narrative. And it doesn't seem to have any value for us. Okay, I'll hold that thought for a second, okay? Let's go to the other end of the Talmud. This is from the book of Sota, 2a, right at the beginning. By the way, Talmud starts with, all Talmuds start with page number 2. Very bizarre. If someone quotes the Talmud in page number 1, it doesn't exist. Very interesting. I don't know what the meaning behind it is. Huh? It's the cut, maybe, I don't know. But this is like ubiquitous. Across all Talmuds, they're all printed the same way. They all look the same way on the page, and they all start from page number 2. Either way, so page 2a, so it's the very first page of the Talmud, it says as follows. 40 days before conception, so we're going to seemingly earlier. It was all pre-conception. 40 days before conception, a bat kol, which is a prophecy, announces bat ploni leploni, right? This child will marry the daughter of so-and-so. Bayit ploni leploni. What's the house that this person's going to live in? And sadeh plonit leploni. Which field is this person going to have? Once again, things that are very important in our lives: who we're going to marry, where we're going to live, and sadeh, a field, is kind of what our livelihood is going to be. All that's very predetermined. And I would argue that perhaps we could agree that the most important decision that someone will make in their lives is who they'll marry. Is that a fair argument? The most important decision, right? Would you all agree? Okay, so arguably one of the most important decisions, right? Huh? Top three. Okay, I think it's maybe the most important. I think maybe there's a good argument either way. And what's the biggest investment most people make? It's their house. And what do people spend the most time with in their life? It's their jobs. It's their livelihood. It's their career. And all these three things: who are you going to marry, and which house are you going to buy, and what field you're going to have, determined before conception. Once again, it seems very deflating, seems very bizarre, and doesn't seem to be very instructive. Like, what's the lesson that we could possibly gain? It's not like we could change it, right? None of us can dial back the clock to what happened before conception. We're trying to influence this angel whose name is Lilo. What does that even mean? So what's the lesson for us? I was thinking that perhaps the Talmud is kind of illuminating for us really what life's all about. And there's a chasm, there's a discrepancy between what we value and what God values. We are physical, right? We're rooted in what we see. We live in a very physical world, and therefore we invest all our time and our efforts in physical pursuits. What happens? We're all going to live, God willing, until 150 or whatever, but then we're going to die. And what happens then? Right? Well, then the physical world's over. In Judaism, we talk about this eternal life, which is more like the spiritual world. The idea of a soul. We'll talk a little bit more about the soul, what it means. But the soul is eternal. Right? Death does not extinguish a soul. There's nothing that someone could possibly do to destroy this power that we all have within ourselves. And in macro Jewish philosophy, we are being told that even though innately we are drawn to focus on the physical, however, what's lasting and what's really important, what's going to outlast us and our kids and, frankly, everything physical is our soul. And therefore, it makes more sense, bigger return on investment, to invest time in your soul. So the idea of becoming a better person, character. You could argue, I know if anyone of you guys read the Steve Jobs book, it seems to make a good argument that the worst characteristics kind of propelled him to his success in business. It's a good argument. I don't know if you read the book or not. You would argue that charity. We talk about charity a lot in Judaism, right? Charity is giving away your money. Why would someone give away their money? It's insane. Why would you do that? It doesn't make any sense, right? Physically, I want money's good, right? It's a very valuable commodity to have in a physical world. But we're told in Judaism to give it away. Take it. Why should I give away my money? It doesn't make any sense. Well, because you're helping someone else. And caring for someone else, even noticing someone else. That idea is only linked to the soul. It's linked to the spiritual. And that's why we're encouraging ourselves to maybe focus less on the physical, give away a little bit of money. It's very painful to do as well. You work hard to make a paycheck, you cut out 10% and give it to charity, give it to someone less fortunate. That's not an easy thing to do. But what that does is that's a reflection of the Jewish mission, which is to invest in eternity, to invest in the soul. But we're dropped into the world and we don't feel that innately. You ask a child, hey, you have 2 candies. Why don't you give one to your brother? Right? For a child, why would I want 2 candies? More pleasure. Right? 1 candy, a little bit less pleasure. So why would I want to help my brother? That's what kids do, because that's the way we are innately. That's the way we start off life. And unfortunately, we grow up through life, and what do we care about? We care about the things that are going to pass, the things that are more trivial. Right? What house we're going to live in, how much time do we spend decorating our houses, how much time do we spend thinking about this, vacillating, debating, right? Worrying about these things. And the Torah is telling us, from God's perspective, those things are already done with. Those things are predetermined. Now, of course, those are not predetermined because we find the other Talmud that says, well, what could you do to become wealthy? So clearly, there is something you can do to influence your wealth. There is something you can do to influence your intelligence, because there's another Talmud that says that as well. But these two ideas of the God's perspective, we find, and that can be very influential for us in our lives. So, we're told, before we're even born, before we're even conceived, the things that we value in our lives. So, number one was how much money someone will have, how strong someone will be physically, physical might, and how intelligent, intellectual prowess. These are all the things that we as bodies value. Everything that you could think of that your body wants will fit into one of those three categories. Right? Either it's it's physical, material assets, or it's physical prowess, or intellectual achievements. Everything fits under those three categories. And that's what we're focused on. That's what we're driven to try to attain. That's what we spend our lives working on. And then what happens? We get old and we say, oh God, I spent my entire life, this great opportunity, and what do I have tomorrow? What do I have after I die? You can't take those things with you. Even Arnold Schwarzenegger, when he's going to die, he's also going to be consumed by maggots. Right? But he had those great muscles. It doesn't matter. And the wealthiest person, maybe they could do it. I remember there was one lady who brought a Ferrari. She said she wanted to be buried in her Ferrari. So maybe with the exception of that woman, you really can't take much with you. You really can't. Like, you can take your material wealth with you. And you're intellectual. I think there's a great example, illustration of this idea. We have Albert Einstein. So Time named him the man of the century, the 20th century. We know that he had great intellectual achievements in a vast variety of scientific fields, which is incredible. And where's his brain now? No one knows where Einstein's brain now is. Well, so when he died, some dude in Princeton took his brain and sliced it up into 150 pieces.
Oh, really?
And then he sent it out. He sent it out to laboratories across the country, maybe even across the world, to investigate why is his brain so potent.
By the way.
Huh?
No permission.
With no permission, of course not. Which, to me, I was thinking this is like the greatest irony. Someone who arguably's intellectual achievements rivaled, almost anyone in recent history. And where's his brain now? It's like cut up like a schnitzel, and it's scattered throughout the world. To me, like this is, what is his brain doing? What's his brain doing for him now? Absolutely nothing. Now, I'm not trying to say Albert Einstein was a good guy, and he was a Jew who had a very strong connection, to Jewish idea. He was offered to be the first president of Israel. He declined. That's true. He would go on to die a couple of years later. But either way, I'm not trying to denigrate Einstein. But to me, this is an illustration of the idea of that. No matter how fantastic your achievements are in these three areas, once you're done, once your physical body and your soul have been separated, those things are no value to you. However, the mitzvah that you do, the small investment that you do in worrying about what your soul needs, taking care of the agenda of the soul, which we don't feel drawn to. None of us feel drawn to that. Right? It's not innate. If we did feel drawn to it, then everyone would just do mitzvahs. There would be no, there's no value, there's no meaning to doing mitzvahs if you feel drawn to it. But when we do a little bit of investing in that, we study Torah, we try to improve our character, we work on our kindness, and any one of those things that are linked to the soul, right? Then we are actually achieving something that's going to last. And the Torah tells us, I don't know what actually happened. I don't know what this angel means. The angel declares about the child. I have no idea what that means. I'm not, as a licensed rabbi, I have no earthly idea what this angel and why is he called Lila and what. But however, what I do know is that these are things that to us as humans, as bodies, we value enormously. And we focus on it enormously. And the Torah is telling us that from God's perspective, these things are not important. They're as if before you even get started your life, these things are already determined. It's predetermined and it's inconsequential, which to me I think is a remarkable idea. And perhaps I would make the argument that maybe that's why the Talmud told this to us. It's really teaching us a deep lesson about what our life is ought to be about. Because when we think about this, and it's a very unsettling thought. If you're unsettled by these words, then that's good. It means you're human. It's very unsettling to think that what we really value a lot is inconsequential. But when you think about it, it really is. A big term. A big picture. But that's an incredible idea that I wanted to talk about what happens even before life. What do we know about the child in gestation, in utero? Anyone knows anything about this? When does a child get a soul? Who knows when does a child get the soul? So the soul, this great power that we're talking about, when does it appear? Anyone knows? At birth? Is that our? Huh? At age 12?
No, week 12.
Week 12?
According to Judaism?
According to Judaism. Huh? When as a harp?
Huh?
Oh, so you're saying that the souls even existed before that? Well, the Talmud says that. That's a great idea. Yeah, the idea of the souls, essentially, we said the souls are eternal. So the fact that you have a soul, the soul is much older than you are. But when is it put into some fact? That's interesting that you mentioned that. Conception. Inception's that movie. The movie with the dreidels, Inception. Something else. So you're 100% right. So the Talmud records a debate or a dialogue between Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, who was the Roman emperor from the year 161, and Rabbi Judah the Prince, right, the great rabbi who was the codifier of the Mishnah. And they had a debate about this question. When does the soul get inserted into the body? It doesn't say when's the soul created, like you said. The soul's already existing before. The soul is extant, because the soul's eternal. It's going to outlast our body, and it existed before our bodies. But when does it put into man? And it says at conception, like you said. So we have, at conception, we have a soul, and throughout the gestation, we have this soul. What's the soul doing? What's the soul doing in utero? What function does it have? This is not a human where we have this conflict between the body and the soul. Like kids, they're kicking and driving the mother nuts, making her throw up.
They're learning Torah.
Booyah, how do you know that? Good job, Alexander. They're studying Torah. Where's that from? Do you know where that's from?
I know that the angel teaches it, that it hits him on the lip.
Yeah, so this is a common misconception that the angel teaches the child Torah. The angel makes the child forget it. This is once again a crazy idea we find in Jewish writings. The child knows the entire Torah. As the child's about to be born, an angel comes, smacks the child in the mouth, and makes the child forget the whole Torah. Now, this is idea. This has been in Jewish writings for thousands of years. Yes, you never heard that? People say that the angel teaches the child Torah. That's a mistake. The angel makes the child forget it. So we have these 9. The child gets a soul at conception. He's got 9 months and change. In our case, it's like 10 months when my wife is pregnant. It feels like that sometimes. So the child gets this soul, and he's studying Torah for 9 months.
How is he studying Torah?
You tell me. I don't know. I'm asking the question. I'm just saying what this is once again from the Talmud. This is an ancient source. And remember, the Talmud, it's not writing fairy tales, it's writing deep lessons. It's teaching us a lot about life. And we're trying to work through the process of birth to earth, or even pre-birth to earth, of Jewish life. And we find these incredible ideas that seem to be very intriguing, very compelling. And what does it mean the child learns the whole Torah? And what does it mean the angel comes and smacks him in the mouth and makes the child forget it? And additionally, if the child is going to forget it anyhow, if you knew for sure the child's going to forget it, why would you teach it to him to begin with? That seems to be a good argument. Why would you teach Torah to a child if you knew for sure that at birth the child is going to forget it? What do these ideas even mean? So, in some inside baseball here. There's another question discussed in that same Talmud piece about the conversation between Rabbi Judah the Prince and Antoninus. When does a child get a yetzer ra, an evil inclination? An evil inclination. I have 5 hours worth of material on evil inclination, but it's the force that compels us to sin. It's the force that empowers our body to override our soul. It's that tension of the soul on one hand and the yetzer ra on the other hand that creates the questions that we have in life, the issues that we grapple with as humans when we have to make a decision, a moral decision. That's a reflection of the soul on one hand, right, desiring one agenda, and the yetzer ra together with the body desiring a separate agenda. Those two conflicting agendas create what we call free will. Free will is where someone has to kind of choose which path you're going to take in whatever decision you're about to make. So if the child gets the soul at conception, when does the child get the yetzer ra? A bar mitzvah? Well, that's the yetzer tov. So the Talmud there concludes that at birth. And it brings a source. And the source is a verse in Genesis. You know, the Talmud, if you've never read it, the way it is, if it brings a lesson, an idea, a law, a thought, a philosophical, ethical idea, it always quotes a verse in Scripture. So a verse in Genesis, or anywhere in the 24 books of the Jewish Bible, it's going to quote a verse to substantiate that idea. So it quotes a verse in Genesis. The verse in Genesis says, "Lefetach chatat rovetz," which means at the entrance, sin crouches. So therefore, at the entrance of life, the child gets the yetzer ra. Now, the other place in the Talmud, so I know we're a little scattered, I know it's late here. I'll wrap it up a little. I'll go quickly through the textual intricacies. So we have the child at birth is forgetting the entire Torah and is getting yetzer ra. The problem is that the verse quoted in both of these places is the same verse. Thus, you have in the verse in the Talmud in Nida, the child gets the whole Torah at birth. It quotes the verse "Lefetach chatas rovetz," at the entrance sin crouches, and the verse and the Talmud in Sanhedrin on page 91 that says the child gets the yetzer ra at birth quotes the same verse "Lefetach chatas rovetz." And we know that if you're using a verse to tell you a law or an idea or a thought or an ethical idea, you can only use one verse to one law. So the commentators ask, wait a minute, how is it possible to use one verse in Genesis, sin crouches at the entrance, for two separate ideas? Number one, that the child gets the yetzer ra at birth, and number two, the child forgets the whole Torah at birth. So the commentators point out is that essentially only one thing happens. The child at conception has a soul. The soul innately knows the whole Torah. The soul doesn't need to be taught by an angel. That's a mistake we all make. We think, no, the soul knows it innately. The soul, like you mentioned, the soul is there at Mount Sinai. The soul at Mount Sinai sucked in the Torah. Right? It's there naturally. If the child has just the soul, the child knows the whole Torah. What happens? Fast forward 9 months later. At birth, the child gets the yetzer ra. Yeah, that's the old wives' tale. That this little indentation. The problem is that if you look at an ultrasound before birth, at 5 months, you see that the indentation's there already. Yeah, it's a nice thought. Yeah. So if we have just the soul, we know the whole Torah. As the child's about to be born, the angel comes and gives them the yetzer ra, gives them that force that counteracts the soul, that force that makes us desire this world and the physical world and not even think about the big picture and the eternal world, what's going to happen after we die. That's not a question that we ask. Why? Because who cares? That's out of our realm of vision. And that is the product of the yetzer ra. And that influences our soul and suppresses our soul and muffles and muzzles and mitigates and just suppresses the influence of our soul, and then we forget the whole Torah. It's not that the Torah was deleted, God forbid. It's just that the influence of the soul is now overwhelmed by the power of our physicality. Thus, what we're essentially doing, we're piecing together the various parts of Jewish writings that talk about what happens to the child before they're born, and we learn essentially what life's all about. We learn about what this conflict, this internal conflict that all humans, if you're a human, you have this internal conflict, this good and evil, this free will arena where you have to choose your allegiances. Are you going to be with the soul? Are you going to be with the eternal? Or are you going to be with your body? And that is a reflection of the physiological makeup of humans. We are a mix, uneasy marriage between a body and a soul, between the forces of the eternal and the forces of the physical. What's a body? You could, if you were to just take the body apart and just separate it by the various molecules that compose a body, you could buy it for like $5 at CVS. If you were just to take, just all the atoms, we're 70% water, we're just a few gallons of water, and if you're just to distill the bones to what they are, it's nothing. If you drop a body in the ground, and you bury it, and you want to exhume a body after a few years, what do you find? You find nothing. It's earth, it's nothing. But we value it so much. And that conflict is what makes life meaningful. If we didn't have that conflict, if all of us were just thinking about our soul, well then none of us would have any urge or any inclination or any desire to do anything besides study Torah all day. Imagine, guys. All you would want to do, 18 hours a day, study Torah. That's what you would want, because that's the only thing that you would have, that you would accord any value to. You can't imagine, right? This, what? I can't imagine.
Tens of thousands of people in Jerusalem crouched in a few hallways.
Study Torah.
They never go out anywhere. They only study Torah all day.
No, but if you could isolate the power of your soul, that's exactly what your soul would want. Now, it's not like that. Why? Because you have a body and you have the Yetzer Hara. You got that smack really hard in your mouth, right? And therefore the soul is there, but it's overwhelmed. And if we were to say in one sentence, what is man's mission on planet Earth, according to Jewish philosophy? What are we here for? I would say it is to restore the state of my makeup, or our makeup, to the way it was before we got smacked in the mouth. Thus, that the soul is the only power that has any influence. We totally neutralized the influence of our body, of the Yetzer Hara. We defeated it, and now we revert back to the status of the child in utero, even if you ever heard this term, of Adam pre-sin. If you ever heard that term, Adam before the sin, that is a major, major concept in Jewish philosophy. What did Adam look like before the sin? And what changed after the sin? And whenever we mention the original sin, everyone thinks we're Christians. That's the automatic. But it's in the Torah, right? This is a very significant. What did Adam look like before the sin? He did not have a Yetzer Hara. He looked like the way every child looks like in utero. All he had was the power of the soul. He had influences that were external, like with the serpent, the snake. That's the external influence. But internally, his only internal influence that he had was out of his soul. Our goal, the perfect man, what does he look like? He looks like a child in utero. That the only thing that dominates his perspective, his consciousness, is his soul. The influence of the Yetzer Hara is totally neutralized. I could talk about this for so long. I don't want to bog you guys down here with interesting, relevant information, but Moses. Right? We know Moses wore a mask. Everyone knows that? In the movie, they didn't put the mask on. If you look at... If you... the Batman. Oh, that's right, because Christian Bale played Moses. Oh, nice. He just got, they swapped the, oh, that's great. They just swapped the props. His costume, they just have to swap the costume. Either way, if you look at Exodus, the second books of the Torah, it talks about Moses, and he, Karan or Panav, his face was so bright that he had to wear a mask. We know that the Talmud says that Pnei Moshe ke Pnei Chama, the face of Moses was like the face of the sun. Jewish people couldn't look at Moses because he looked like the sun. You try to look at the sun, it doesn't work. Try to look at the sun, it doesn't work. Everyone tried that? Everyone tried to do the sun stare? Yeah, you ruin your eyes, right? It's because it's beyond. Moses' face was like the sun. He had to wear a mask the entire time. Moses was the one man in history that had managed to actually do this completely. To totally neutralize the power of his body, of his physical, of his Yetzirah, and to be totally dominated by the influence of his soul. It's shown forth, and if you were to actually try to see a soul, you wouldn't be able to look at it because it's from a different world. It's not supposed to have any interface with our physical senses. It's not physical. Like I said, it's eternal. It's something from the spiritual realms that is put into this physical world. But it's supposed to be suppressed there, and the Jews couldn't look at it to wear a mask. And there's many sources to talk about what the sun is and how the sun is one of the three things that are me'en olam haba, that are a measure of the eternal world. In this world, one of the three things is the sun. Why? Because you can't look at it, And the soul is like that as well. The soul is this eternal little piece of heaven that's put into our heart, and our job is to uncover that because it's covered by lots and lots of layers of schmutz as a result of that smack that we got from the angel. So this kind of like these ideas that if you just read them disjointedly, if you just read them, we have a child studying Torah and the angel, like what does these things even mean? But when you piece it all together, you find a worldview that is universal vision of what it's all about. When we talk about Torah, what's Torah? Torah is the tool that we use to uncover the power of our soul. That's simple as that. Right? Go back to the big picture. What's our mission? Our mission is to try to get back to that state. How do we do that? By neutralizing the Yetzirah. And the Torah tells us, give charity. Why would a human want to give charity? Doesn't make any sense. You're having less money. Why would you give away your money? Does that make any sense? It's like pouring money down the drain. Well, no, because doing that, you're empowering your soul and you're weakening your Yetzirah. The Torah has lots of restrictions on what you can eat and who you can sleep with, what you can do in Shabbat. All these restrictions, they are small little chinks in the armor that we create, links between us and our soul, and also, together with that, mitigating the power of our Yetzirah. Simple. Thus achieving the end goal. So if someone tells you, what, Rabbi, I don't believe God really cares about if I eat milk and meat together. Doesn't make any sense. That's an argument that I've heard countless times. It doesn't make sense that creator of heaven and earth and all the cosmos and all the hundreds of sextillions of stars, that's what he cares about. My diet. And that's a good argument. I'm not going to contend the argument. However, let's look at it from our perspective. God wants us to achieve greatness. God wants us to achieve the ultimate pleasure. We do that by tapping into a much higher realm of pleasure that's eternal, that lasts forever. It's the high that never goes away. There's no after effects. There's no letdown. That's what God wants from us. However, there's a process that how do you go about doing that? You have to work hard to suppress this layer that is covering it all up. It's like you have to unwrap the packaging. But the packaging's so beautiful, who wants to unwrap it? But what's inside is much more valuable. Yes, and pulling off the package could be painful sometimes. It's hard. It's like when you get something from Amazon. It's frustration-free packaging. I bought an automatic like a Braun toothbrush. Goodness, it's impossible to open it. But what you want's inside there. I think it's the same way. Like we're opening up our hearts. That's what we're doing. And yes, it's painful sometimes, not easy. And our hearts is much harder, it's much more frustration packaging. That's what we're doing. We're uncovering, the main event. And unfortunately, too many of us are stuck in what, from God's perspective and from our soul's perspective, those things are predetermined. Those things aren't even discussed after 40 days before conception. So these, I think are some remarkable days how we could build an entire ecosystem, if you will, of Jewish philosophy out of just what the Torah tells us of what happens before birth. What happens at birth? But again, what's the first mitzvah the child does? I'll stop here. I have a lot to say on what happens after someone dies as well. It's a whole class. That's the most. People are fascinated by what is. Huh? Booyah, Brit. That's right. The first mitzvah is the Brit, the circumcision. I'm sorry? For the boys. Okay, the first. That's right. That's right. So, before we get there, sorry, I have one more cool thing I want to share with you guys. Talmud tells another of the crazy things that happened before. As the child's about to be born, it says that they make him swear. There's an oath that every one of us took before we can remember. There's an oath, and I'll read you what the oath says. Be righteous and don't be wicked. That's how it starts. And everyone has to swear this, all of us. And even if the entire world tells you that you're righteous, in your mind, view yourself as being wicked. You have room to improve. Okay? You should know that the Almighty is pure, the angels are pure, and your soul is pure. If you guard it in its purity, fantastic. And if not, I'm going to take it away from you. Thus is the nature of the oath that everyone takes before, right as you're about to be born. I'll say it again. Be righteous, don't be wicked. Even if you think you're righteous, even if everyone tells you, oh, you're a righteous guy, right? Even if everyone tells you that, you still have room to improve. You should know that the Almighty is pure, the angels are pure, your soul is pure. Guard it in its purity, maintain its purity, and then great. And if not, I'm going to take it away from you. What's this essentially telling us? What are the lessons that we could derive from this? What can we glean from this very peculiar sounding oath that we all take? That's right. That's right. And be it tzaddik, that would say, do what's right, be righteous, and that maybe dovetails real nicely with what we spoke about earlier. Don't be wicked. Fantastic. You should know that your soul is pure. What's it telling you? It's pure. It's pure like the Almighty, like the angel. What does that even mean? What's it telling us? If your soul is pure, what happens? Don't make it dirty. Right? You don't need to accomplish anything, essentially. Your soul is there. You just have to uncover it. Right? You have to make sure that the Yetzer Hara is not going to influence it. Thus, you have to chip away at the effect, at the vise that the Yetzer Hara has on your soul. But to me, this is refreshing. To me, this kind of, like we said, this goes very nicely with what we mentioned earlier. All we need to do is to uncover what is already there. Our soul does not need to be purified. It's pure already. It's pure like the Almighty God Himself. It's pure like the angels. It's pure. Our job is one of conservation. Well, how do you conserve a soul? By making sure that the Yetzer Hara, the effects, the power, the influence of the physical does not schmutzify it, does not sully it, does not dampen it, does not weaken it. Thus, you uncover the power of the soul. I want to just finish. I know we have 4 minutes left. I'll try to do this really quickly. So, circumcision, the first mitzvah we got. Today, a lot of people today, this is not a new thing. A lot of people say that this is mutilation. They want to, in Germany, there was right. It's mutilation. Right? You're taking a helpless baby and you're cutting off an organ, or not really an organ, but cutting off part of their right. Yeah. Well, yeah. And the question is, it sounds maybe barbaric. We know that this is the one mitzvah that the Jewish people have been persecuted over more than any other mitzvah. Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Because it's But it's also dropping as well. Either way, Antiochus, okay, the 2nd century before the Common Era, he said, this is the Assyrian Greeks, the Seleucid Greeks, right? They said, if you give your child circumcision, we're going to execute you. And circumcision was banned on pain of death during Hadrian's in the 2nd century of the Common Era. Now we know that even in this past 100 years in Soviet Russia, circumcision was banned. There's a lot of Russian Jews that come to Israel and they're in their 50s or 60s and they don't have circumcision. And from what I've heard, it's somewhat of a messier process once the child is that advanced. But this is the first mitzvah that we have, the first mitzvah that Abraham has, the first mitzvah that the child has, and it seems Abraham was quite old, exactly, but it seems to be like a mitzvah that doesn't, what's the meaning behind it, and how why is it so significant that it has to be the first mitzvah the child does, and obviously it's the first mitzvah of the Torah that we find that was given to Abraham. It's the first mitzvah the child does. It clearly has some significance. And we know it's a mitzvah that the Gentiles seem to really dislike. It seems to be a mitzvah that is identified with being Jewish. And even Jews that are very distant from Judaism, they still circumcise their kids. So there's something very special about it, but what is it? What's the meaning behind it? So I want to share with you guys. I found 5 different reasons why we circumcise our children. And then we'll see how, for what? Foreskin, yeah. And we'll see how these reasons perhaps really are once again another model for Jewish life at large, and Jewish purpose, and Jewish mission, and the Jewish mission that began with Abraham 3,800 years ago, that continues today, the idea of Tikkun Olam, how that's fulfilled in circumcision. Let's start with number 1. Number 1, we're told that we're not perfect. The child's born, and the child looks perfect. He's got 10 fingers and 10 toes, and everything works fine, but the child's not perfect. And where are they not perfect? They're not perfect in their body. Because the body has the Yetzer Hara. The body is convincing us that what is here and now, and what we can encounter with our senses, is all that matters. And that's not perfect. Thus, we demonstrate that we need to change. We need to fix it. Our body's not perfect. Our soul's perfect. Our body's not. And the world at large is not perfect. The idea of Tikkun Olam means to fix the world. The world's broken. Our body's broken as well. And they're both broken in the same way. Our body's broken because we don't see God, we don't see the eternal. The world's broken because the world doesn't see God, the world doesn't see the eternal. It's essentially the same thing. Thus, we demonstrate that the child's lifelong mission is going to be to fix himself and to fix the world at large. Idea number 1. Idea number 2. The location of this mitzvah is at the epicenter of the challenge that at least men have in their lives. We know that nothing derails men more than sexual proclivities. Thus, it's put in a very specific place at kind of the epicenter of this challenge that the person is going to have. And there, it's a sign where someone is making this bond with God at this most volatile place to kind of remind himself, this is an area that you have to make sure that you don't get totally swamped by. That's the Ramban, Nachmanides, in Genesis. Number 3, we find King David. This is a great narrative about King David. This is the Talmud in Menachos, I think it's 43 or 44. And it says King David was in a bathhouse, and he got very depressed. Why? Because he says, I have no mitzvahs. The bathhouse, there's no mitzvahs in a bathhouse. By every Jewish door, there's mitzvahs, not by the bathhouse. He's not wearing his tefillin. He's not wearing his tzitzis. He's not studying Torah. He's like, I'm devoid of mitzvahs. And then it says he looked at his brit milah and his circumcision, and he was happy. This is a mitzvah that's always with you. It's like branded into every Jew is this mitzvah. Thus, the other idea is the idea of confidence. It's always with us, and we have to remember God at all times. And it's a mitzvah that accompanies us at every stage of our life. Number 4, if you notice, I don't want to get too detailed into the anatomy, but we're all adults here, right? What, Josh?
Now when you start talking about
I'll show you the picture later.
So the Brit Milah ceremony is essentially two parts. There's the removal of the foreskin, and then the skin is pulled down, and it exposes what's called in Jewish writing the crown. That's right. Or the atara, really. Atara. The idea being, and this is an idea that's very, very widespread in Jewish writings, the idea of our mission in life is to bring out the crown of God. It's to expose God's glory in ourselves. When we expose our soul, we're exposing the spiritual, and we're bringing God to the world. And remember, God and our soul were compared; they're both pure. Right? If we expose our soul, by dint of that, we expose God. We bring the crown of God to the world, to ourselves and to the world. Thus, this mitzvah demonstrates really what mitzvahs at large are supposed to do. And lastly, it's the brand of a Jew. And this is Abraham's mitzvah. Abraham got this whole mission started. Abraham is the father of our ideology. Abraham was the first one to start this process of tikkun olam. We talked about the 2,000 years of chaos last time. Right? Abraham was the one who started the process of reversing the chaos. If you didn't hear the class, sorry. It's a whole class on Jewish mission at large, tikkun olam. But Abraham was the one who introduced this idea. We're continuing the Abrahamic mission. And this was the mitzvah given to Abraham. And in fact, we find two insanely striking teachings, both from the Talmud, both of them very similar. It says that Abraham sits at the doorstep of Gehenna. Gehenna, we'll get to that's more over what happens after someone dies. But Abraham is sitting there at the doorstep, at the entrance, and he does not let anyone that has a circumcision come in. That's what the Talmud says. In another place, it adds as follows. It says, if someone sins so horrifically that they need to be cleansed, they have to take a foreskin that was from a baby that died before they were born. They got to slap it onto that guy and let him in. Very bizarre, right? But what it's essentially telling us is that this idea of a Brit Milah is something which is continuation of God's relationship with Abraham. Thus, it's Abraham's mitzvah. Abraham started this process of fixing the world. We continue that with as demonstrated with our Brit Milah. And once we're part of Abraham's fraternity, well, then he sticks up for us. So these are the 5 ideas that we found. So I want to just wrap them all together, and we will conclude. I'm sorry if I'm taking you over time. I apologize. I think that essentially these 5 reasons that we mentioned, this is all that we talked about till now. Right? The idea of we're not perfect. We're here to perfect the world. Right? We're here to perfect ourselves. We're here to expose our soul. The world is broken. Right? The child shows that as well. The kid's not perfect. We're not born perfect. We have to fix it. Right? How do we fix it? How do you uncover the power of your soul? Well, you have to mitigate the effect of the body of the Yetzer Hara that's covering it. Thus, the idea of the Brit Milah being at the epicenter of the power of the Yetzer Hara. And this idea is so important, it has to be with us at all times. Right? You can never shed this idea. Because this is the idea of core Judaism. This is our mission. This is our life. This is our mission. You cannot take off your tzitzis and then say, forget about it. This is so important. It's got to be with us at all times. And by doing that, we reveal the crown, A, in our soul, and B, in the entire world. Right? By fulfilling this mission, right, we're part of Abraham's team. Thus, it's Abraham's mitzvah. We're part of this big group, this fraternity that started with Abraham and is going to continue and hopefully be completed with Mashiach, like we mentioned last time. Thus, the first mitzvah that happens when a child is 8 days old, we are already inserting them into this whole huge picture of what it means to be a Jew and what the deeper meanings are and how you go about fulfilling that. So thus, yes, we all know that we do Brit Milah to every kid at 8 days old. We all know that. But hopefully today, we see a little bit about why we do that and the meaning behind that process and how even what we find about the child before the child's even born, all that is kind of teaching us a lot about this this framework, the system of what it means to be a Jew and how we go about doing that, guys. Thanks a lot. I'm sorry for going over time. This was fantastic. But as an 8-day-old child already, is. Oh, what does the word? What does the number 8 mean? Good question. You want to stay here for another hour? No, but 8 symbolizes L'malam min hateva. It's more than 1 week. There's a lot of things about that. Good question.
Guys, thank you all for coming. Next week is the final